The rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse apartment, each drop like a tiny fist demanding attention. Emma stood at the glass, watching the city lights blur into watercolor streaks below. 2 years. 2 years of living in this beautiful cage, married to a man who treated her like an elegant piece of furniture. She pulled her silk robe tighter around her shoulders and glanced at the clock on the marble mantelpiece. Nearly midnight. Daniel would be home soon from another late business dinner. Another evening spent building his empire while she waited alone in their pristine home. Their arrangement had seemed so simple at the beginning. Emma needed money for her mother's medical bills and her nursing school debt. Daniel needed a wife to satisfy his grandfather's old-fashioned demands about marriage and stability before he could inherit full control of the family company. A contract marriage. Clean, professional, temporary. What Emma hadn't expected was how lonely it would feel to live with someone who barely acknowledged her existence. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the spacious apartment. Emma's heart did that familiar flutter it always did when Daniel came home. A reaction she'd never quite managed to suppress despite 2 years of his polite indifference. Emma, his deep voice carried from the entryway. "In here," she called softly, not turning from the window. She heard his footsteps on the marble floor, measured and controlled like everything else about Daniel Montgomery. Even at this hour, she knew he would look perfectly put together in his expensive suit, not a hair out of place. "You're up late," he observed, his voice neutral as always. Emma finally turned to face him. Even after 2 years, the sight of her husband still took her breath away. Tall and lean, with dark hair that wanted to curl despite his efforts to tame it, and gray eyes that seemed to see everything while revealing nothing. He was devastatingly handsome, and completely untouchable. "Couldn't sleep," she said simply. Daniel loosened his tie, a gesture so familiar it made her chest ache. How many evenings had she watched him perform this same ritual, always maintaining that careful distance between them? "The quarterly reports came in today," he said, moving to pour himself a drink from the bar cart. "The company exceeded expectations again." Emma nodded politely. He always shared these updates with her, as if she were a business partner rather than his wife. Which, she supposed, was exactly what she was. "That's wonderful, Daniel. Your grandfather would be proud." Something flickered across his face at the mention of his grandfather, who had passed away 6 months ago. The old man's death had fulfilled the terms of their contract, but neither of them had mentioned ending the arrangement. They simply continued their strange, distant dance. "Emma," Daniel said suddenly, setting down his glass untouched. "We need to talk." Her stomach dropped. This was it. He was finally ready to dissolve their marriage, now that he had what he needed. She had been expecting this conversation for months, dreading it while simultaneously longing for it. At least when they divorced, she could stop pretending her feelings didn't exist. "Of course," she said, moving to sit on the white leather sofa. She folded her hands in her lap, preparing herself for the inevitable. Daniel didn't sit. Instead, he began pacing in front of the fireplace, running his hands through his hair. The gesture was so unlike his usual composed demeanor that Emma found herself watching him with growing concern. "I saw you today," he said abruptly. "At the hospital." Emma's breath caught. She had been volunteering at the children's ward for the past 6 months, something she did during the day while Daniel was at work. She hadn't thought he knew about it. "You were reading to that little girl with cancer," Daniel continued, his voice strangely rough. "Sophie, I think her name was. You had her laughing despite everything she's going through." Emma's cheeks warmed. "How did you?" "I was there for a board meeting. The hospital is one of our major charity recipients." Daniel stopped pacing and looked directly at her. "Do you know what I realized? Watching you with those children?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. "I realized that for 2 years, I've been living with the most incredible woman I've ever met. And I've been too much of a coward to actually live with her." Emma's heart began to race. "Daniel, what are you saying?" He moved closer, sitting on the coffee table directly in front of her so they were eye to eye. For the first time in their marriage, there was no careful distance between them. "I'm saying that somewhere along the way, this stopped being a business arrangement for me," he said quietly. "I'm saying that I wake up every morning grateful that you're here. And I go to sleep every night wishing I had the courage to tell you how I feel." Emma stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. How you feel? Daniel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands. His touch was gentle, reverent, as if she were something precious he had been afraid to break. I'm in love with you, Emma, he said simply. I have been for longer than I care to admit. I've been keeping my distance because I thought it was what you wanted, what our agreement required, but I can't do it anymore. Tears sprang to Emma's eyes. Daniel, I know this changes everything, he continued. I know we agreed this was temporary. If you want to end this, I'll understand. I'll make sure you're taken care of, that you never want for anything. But before you decide, I need you to know that these have been the best 2 years of my life, even with the distance between us. Emma laughed through her tears, a sound of pure joy that seemed to surprise them both. You impossible man, she whispered. Do you really think I stayed married to you just for the money? Daniel's eyes widened. Emma, I've been in love with you since our wedding day, she confessed. I've been waiting for 2 years for you to see me as more than just a contractual obligation. The transformation on Daniel's face was beautiful to witness. Wonder, relief, and overwhelming love chased each other across his features. Slowly, carefully, he leaned forward until their foreheads touched. I've wasted so much time, he murmured. We have the rest of our lives to make up for it, Emma whispered back. When Daniel kissed her, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. It was their first real kiss as husband and wife, and Emma felt like she was finally coming home. As the rain continued to fall outside, they held each other close, no longer strangers sharing a space, but partners ready to build a real life together. The contract that had brought them together was just paper now. What bound them was something far stronger, love, freely given and gratefully received. No more distance, Daniel promised against her lips. No more walls, Emma agreed. And in that moment, their real marriage finally began.